Hey there, Internet friends. Trevor Starkey here with another episode of Movie Monday. As I mentioned on Thursday, today's video is going to be all about my spoiler-filled review of The Last Jedi. If you want to see my spoiler-free impressions of it, you can go check that video out. Otherwise, definitely go watch the movie before really watching the rest of this, unless you don't care about being spoiled, in which case, here we go. So in my spoiler-free impressions, I talked about how very early on Rian Johnson kind of decides to make this a very tonally different Star Wars than we've seen in the past. And what I was alluding to there is the scene in the opening space battle where Poe goes up to the Star Destroyer and basically makes a joke at Hux's expense about being on hold. And he just kind of does that, yeah, I'm on hold for General Hux, after Hux does his whole long tirade. And then that, in and of itself, fits a little bit in with his character, because the beginning, I mean, our whole introduction to Poe was him being held by Kylo Ren, and doing the whole, like, who talks first? Who goes first kind of thing. So, Poe, I think, uses humor as deflection, which is fine. I think what tonally is jarring here is Hux's kind of, like, buy-in to the bit. Not even buy-in necessarily, but that it's not just Poe cracking about this, it is Hux kind of responding. And just in and of itself, the idea of being on hold and that tried and true gag just doesn't feel right in a long time ago, a galaxy far away. So it just, yeah, it felt jarring at first. It didn't bother me as much in my second attempt, or my second watch through of the film, but it's still, like, weird, and it's one of the jokes that doesn't land for me, as I think there is a lot of humor in here that I get the appeal, and it might bring a smile to my face, but very rarely did I actually, like, laugh out loud in this film. And given the number of places they want me to, I think a lot of the humor just kind of falls flat. Fortunately, there's way more to this film than humor. So in this opening sequence, you have this epic space battle, which is one of the cooler space battles we get, even if the like rationale behind these bombers leaves them entirely too vulnerable to ever be really of any kind of use. The fact that they're so slow going, and that, like, they're just basically walking suicide bombers, and one TIE fighter flying into one just, like, completely wrecks the whole fleet, doesn't bode well for their usefulness in actual combat. But it is a cool sequence, and seeing kind of the small guys take out the giant dreadnought here it gives the Resistance a nice little early victory, which is going to be, in stark contrast to so much of the rest of the film. And the fact that it is somebody we don't know that gets the big heroic moment here, and sets up the relationship between that gunner who makes the sacrifice and her sister Rose, who we're going to spend a lot of the film with. It is one of the first instances of this film where we get to play around with the idea that you don't have to be a Skywalker, you don't have to be one of our major heroes, you don't have to even be necessarily a known quantity to have heroic moments. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot throughout this film is the idea of being a hero gets redefined. We get to see people you wouldn't think of as heroes kind of elevate and really step up to the plate to be the heroes that the Resistance needs. Moving away from the space happenings, we get to see kind of the payoff of Rey and Luke on the island, and Luke's first response to seeing the lightsaber is to nonchalantly throw it over his shoulder, which is another one of those moments where, like, it's going for humor that doesn't really hit, but I appreciate that it very, abruptly sets a tone that this Luke is more maybe in line with Yoda, the Yoda that he met 30 some odd years ago. He is more curmudgeonly, and he's, as we find out, he's been in isolation. He's closed himself off from the Force. He says he went there to die. He's doing a bad job of it if he's learned how to milk the local wildlife and stab fish with a 30-foot spear, but he doesn't really want to be involved in the Jedi Sith battles anymore. He went down that path, and as he kind of alludes to and talks about, he bought into his own hype and became a legend, and that ended up being his downfall in terms of his relationship with Ben Solo and what led to Kylo Ren. And so he doesn't want any part of that. He has basically tied himself off so that he doesn't make things worse. And when I talked in my spoiler-free version about the idea of kind of this film paying off 40 years of storytelling, that's what I'm talking about. Is you have Luke, who the last time we really got to work with him and see him, he was kind of the hero of the rebellion, and he took out the Death Star, and then he brought Darth Vader over to the light before his death, and that's like the hero that we saw Luke, and you know, there's that whole mantra of like, never meet your heroes. So Rey meets him, and he's not what she was expecting. He has suffered loss and failure, and that has torn him down in a way over 30 years. You know, if you think about the original events of the first trilogy kind of taking place over, you know, a few years, he's gone through so much more in the time that we've been away from him than we ever got to see with him. So he has lived a life, and that life hasn't been as glamorous as maybe we've wanted to kind of see over these years, but it's been maybe more true to life and true to, I think, what a lot of us feel as we get older, that, you know, we may have regrets of a life we wish we'd led or something like that. And I think that is inherent in Luke in this, as well as Mark Hamill's performance is wonderful. It was great to see him back and give kind of this gravitas to this character who isn't the hero that we came to know, but he's still there is still a piece of that in there. And we get to see a little bit of that when Chewie barges in, and he kind of gets to have his like, Chewie, wait, where's Han? There's that touching moment. There's the moment we get later in the film with him and Leia. We get to see kind of the lovely kind of reunion, so to speak, there. Even when he kind of sneaks aboard the Millennium Falcon and sees R2-D2 again, that we get to see kind of Luke go back to young Luke and see that, and R2-D2, you know, shows him Leia as an attempt to kind of bring him out of his funk. And it's just, I love everything about Luke Skywalker in this film. It's not a Luke Skywalker I ever thought I'd see, and it's not one I probably ever would have like picked to see, but the direction they take him is so enjoyable. And yeah, I mean, I get people being like, he's a little snarky and he's a little, you know, curmudgeonly, but I think given the things that he has experienced, I buy all of it. I can totally see him going down that route. So I think him getting his final hero moment at the end, when he, you know, uses all of his strength to project himself out there and have his sequence with Kylo Ren at the end, is a fitting end to the living embodiment of Luke Skywalker. And I'm certainly curious to see if we get to, you know, experience him in Force Ghost form in Episode 9 next. Also on the heroic character front, we get to see Leia. This is very much a Leia Organa film, and that's incredibly great, knowing, of course, the sad passing of Carrie Fisher, that she has such a wonderful send-off here. You know, it's weird that there's the scene, you know, early on in the movie where the bridge gets blown up and she goes flying out into space, and you think, oh, okay, that's, you know, we know Carrie Fisher has passed, we know of that tragedy. Did they write her out? Is this them writing her out of the film? And no, it's not. It was already there, and they bring her back in and show that she has been, she has trained in the Force, and she is able to create this Force bubble around her out in space and come flying back in. People are giving shit about the flying thing, but I'm like, what, do you want her, like, coming in like Superman and da-da-da? Like, let her come in and pull herself back to the ship. Deal with it. It's such a weird little complaint that I don't know why people are fixated on that, but it's a really cool moment for her. But even outside of just her using the Force in such a powerful way, she has such a great kind of presence and leadership throughout the rest of this film, when she's not kind of in her space coma, that it really is heartwarming, and it's sad to know that they probably had other plans for her coming back in Episode 9, that either she might be killed off in between the films, or they might just kind of write her out of the script so we don't see her in the movie, or maybe they do kind of the use her likeness and bring her back in a digital form in some way. But it's very much great to see her get such a limelight in this film as well. You very much had Han as kind of like a good focal piece for The Force Awakens, and I think this very much is Luke and Leia's show, as we also kind of see what the new kids are doing. But the fact that you had both of the Skywalkers out there really kind of shining in their respective elements really warmed my heart. And it's, again, great payoff to something that began 40 years ago. I teared up multiple times in a lot of her work, and especially, again, that scene between her and Luke at the end when he comes to visit her in his kind of projection. It's such a sweet, tender, touching moment that it made even more so by the fact that Carrie Fisher has sadly passed away. But yeah, both times I've seen it now, tears were streaming down my face when we got there. Elsewhere, we have all of the scenes between Rey and Kylo Ren are wonderful, from the sound design where it feels like the air just gets sucked out of the screen when they're kind of pulled together in their little force bridge, and the fact that that is a new ability that we haven't seen before, that they can communicate over vast distances in space through the Force is great, and it's great character moments for both of them. We get to see Rey struggling with who she is, as well as trying to find her place through all of this, and we get to see Ren struggle with his humanity a little bit, and he is maybe more humanized through his correspondence with Rey, and we get to see, of course, the flashbacks, the various flashbacks to the night that Ben Solo turned into Kylo Ren. We get to see that in a few smart ways that are, especially on a second viewing, it's interesting seeing that the first time when Luke kind of talks about it, he of course presents him in the best light possible, no lightsabers at all, and Ben just kind of tears down the walls. Then when Kylo Ren explains it, he just sees an evil-looking Luke with his lightsaber there. He fights back, and then we get to see kind of what probably really happened in Luke's revised version of it, in that he did, for a split second, succumb to his fear and his anger, and so he pulls out the lightsaber, but he doesn't. He immediately passes, and he's not going to go through with it, but that split second was all that he needed, was all that Kylo Ren needed to kind of push him over the edge. So, again, that all leads into Luke, and his ultimate failure there has led to the deaths of millions. If you think about all the planets, which I'm sure he was sitting on that island. Well, actually, maybe he didn't sit on that island and feel like a great disturbance in the Force, but if he was closed off from it. But obviously he now knows that his friend Han has fallen to Kylo's hand, and so many others had as well. So that's all his failure, and he has to live with that. But back to Rey and Kylo Ren, their whole interaction throughout their various connections of course, leads to their epic showdown with Snoke, which is among my favorite combat scenes in any of the Star Wars. It's probably up there with Duel of the Fates from Phantom Menace, that first one, as like just great choreographed fights. This one probably tops it, and cause you have this thing that we haven't seen before of light side and dark side having to work together, and we don't know. We think maybe initially that that Kylo has turned to the light, and it's not until the battle is done that no, he just wants to kind of take the power for himself, and that's of course a gut punch moment. But in both times I saw it, the Snoke getting lightsabered was a cheer moment for the crowd. So it's very much it plays with that, and it kind of knows that yes, that is a great character moment for Kylo Ren that leads into this great fight that then pulls the rug out from under you when Kylo says, like, come, join me and we can do this together. And it's like, no, you were so close to being a good guy. You never would have been redeemed because we saw you kill Han, but there could have been some kind of mirror to Darth Vader there, I guess. And on that note, I think Kylo Ren is, and specifically Adam Driver's performance, is probably one of the funnest things about this new trilogy. I'm loving him as a character. I think he has more depth, and we're getting to spend more time with him than any other villain in certainly in Star Wars lore. If even Anakin Skywalker, we got very little time with him as Darth Vader, as like a central character. We got him as like the imposing villain, but we never really got to know his motivations outside of working for Palpatine. So we're getting a lot more of the inner workings and why Kylo is the way Kylo is, and his struggle, trying to live up to his ancestry and then saying, screw it, let the past die. This is for me now, and we get to see his rage multiple times through here. That just makes it a much more enjoyable trip. And the hero stories are always great if you also have a villain that you can identify with too, and kind of have those connections. And so being able to spend so much time with Kylo Ren in these films, and having him kind of be set up now as the big bad, it's that much more fun to cheer for Rey and Finn and Poe and the Resistance against him, because we've seen the journey that he's had to lead him here, as well as the journey that they've had. Speaking of Finn, he and Rose go off for a lot of this film into the little side story that takes them onto like that gambling planet thing. And what I love about that is that it's, I hate that it is so CGI heavy, and that we, after making such an effort to come back to practical stuff in The Force Awakens, that we go back to this very CGI-filled planet that feels reminiscent of the prequels, and just doesn't feel like, it just feels like nonstop green screen. But I love the idea that we get more of the lore outside of our central conflict of the war. We're getting to see what worlds look like, and kind of the people who are on the edges of the war. All of these people who are profiting off of the war and the luxurious, lavish life that they've led, as well as the underbelly of the people who are suffering and growing up to become the resistance of the future. I loved kind of that detour, if only for that little coloring in of the world, and getting to kind of sprinkle in these ideas of you don't have to be, heroes can come in all shapes and sizes, and there is much more gray to this conflict than we're used to seeing in light side versus dark side. The fact that the guy's ship they steal was selling to the Resistance as well as the First Order. The waters are murkier than strictly good versus strictly evil. Even DJ as a character, Benicio del Toro's character, who I loved. I love his kind of just quirkiness to the character, but even he's very much like, DJ supposedly seems to be don't join. I think that's the story I was hearing around his name, and he even says in there, like, don't join a side, like, be free. They're gonna bomb you today, you'll bomb them tomorrow. Who wins? And so I love that idea of just kind of no victors maybe in war. There are no winners in war, only survivors. So yeah, while I could have done without all of the CGI and the creatures and whatnot of that planet, the fact that it did kind of fill in this lore was a nice touch, and it gave us a nice new interesting character in DJ. Whether or not DJ comes back in the next film, I don't know, but I think they definitely left the door open intentionally for that, and he could be kind of one of those interesting scoundrel characters that the Resistance hates but has to work with to get the ends to justify their means or whatever. Getting back to the galaxy's slowest chase scene, I love it / hate that it felt so contrived that they were, in this 16-hour, like, oh, they've got 16 hours of fuel, they're just a little bit faster than us, so we can't catch them, but we can, stay on their back. It was a weird little thing, but it certainly set up a different kind of, instead of it being like, oh, there's a thing you've got to destroy at the end, this was very much like, we've got to just get away from this thing. We've got to get away from them. We've got to survive, basically. And it if for nothing else, it led us to that great moment where Vice Admiral Holdo, you think? I don't know. Laura Dern's character has that great moment where she turns the ship around and hyper speeds it through in what is probably one of my favorite visual moments of any Star Wars film. And it's another one where the sound design deliberately just takes everything away, and you just see the flash of destruction as this ship flies in through hyperspace and just destroys the fleet as it passes, or as it rams into everything. And it's, one of my friends was like, well, if that's a thing they could do, why don't they always do it? I'm like, I can't imagine those cruisers are cheap. And I'm sure there probably have been suicide runners in other areas of this war, but getting to see it kind of on that big of a scale is impressive. And just, visually the imagery of the few scenes there, a few little short shots, is just phenomenal. And that was another, the first time I saw it in a crowded theater, everybody was just like and it was really cool to witness. One of my favorite moments of this film. And that helps get us down to kind of our last little foray, fighting on Crate, where we get to see really the First Order land their troops far enough away that you gotta slowly trudge and bring everything to the base. And it is very kind of reminiscent of the Hoth battle. It's unavoidably going to draw comparisons to that, but this is very much we're just trying to survive. Again, that's so much of this film is just about trying to survive and live long enough to be the spark that ignites the fire that will bring down the First Order, I think is the phrase they keep saying throughout this. And so it is very much this will be kind of the darkest that the Resistance has, and I imagine we will see them come back in Episode 9 and manage to survive. And we get to see a little bit of that here and there with kind of the off-worlders and the Broom Kid with the Force and whatnot pulling it at the end. But anyway, jumping back real quick, I did want to touch on the fact that Yoda makes an appearance in here. And again, it's weird that they go so CGI heavy on the gambling planet when they also give us the puppet Yoda here. It's a weird, jarring disconnect between those, but it was great to see him back. And again, it fit that he was in there alongside kind of Luke in his old curmudgeonly state, and that he's still giving Luke these lessons about the idea of failure is the greatest educational tool, or what are learning. We learn the most from failure. So the inclusion of Yoda, I appreciated, I enjoyed, and it's another one of those kind of, it adds to the lore that, hey, it's apparently canon now that Force ghosts can whack people with their sticks, as well as call thunder down and affect the world around them. So interesting and exciting to see Yoda back and the ramifications that means for the broader universe. Anyway, back to Crate, we get that great final kind of, again, just beautiful imagery of the ships flying out onto the salty landscape and kicking up the red dust underneath on their way to meet the First Order, and that they are, like, it is a losing battle, and Poe finally learns, like, hey, we need to live to fight another day. We gotta walk away from this when we know we're beat. But you have that moment where Finn says, no, I'm willing to die for this. We've got to stop them. And then Rose knocks him out of the sky. And it's a little cheesy in how it was delivered, but I absolutely love the sentiment of, we're not going to win this by destroying what we hate. We have to win it by saving what we love. It's a very touching moment that, again, speaks to that idea that there are no winners in war, just survivors. And so it's the subtler messaging of this film is why I think it resonates with me. It's not about heroes in the sense that we've come to know them over this. It's about regular people doing heroic things. I think that is what is exciting. I mean, even the idea that Rey's lineage is, she's a nobody. Her parents were drunks or whatever who sold her off for alcohol. Like, the fact that she is as powerful as she is as a nobody in the lore of this universe, shows us that, these powerful beings can exist outside the Skywalker lineage, and that that otherwise unimportant people can do very important things. And Rose's entire character is about that. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed that kind of message of the film. So that's kind of what I want to touch on. You also, of course, have the final amazing back and forth between Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker's projection. I'm a fan of how Luke goes out here. He fights off Kylo long enough to get everybody away, and so the Resistance can be reborn, as he kind of touches on. The Resistance is reborn today. The war is just beginning, and I won't be the last Jedi. That's a kind of a great send-off for the character, and so he fades away. And again, I think, especially with Carrie Fisher's passing, I think we will probably see more Luke in the next film, as serving as a Force ghost, either guide to Rey and the new Resistance, or as kind of a, hey, come back to the light against Kylo. That I think would be certainly interesting as well. So those are my spoiler-filled thoughts of Star Wars: The Last Jedi. I think I covered pretty much all the big beats I wanted to hit. I hate porgs. I just don't think I don't think they add anything to the film, and I think they're just a lot of the humor that fell flat on me. You have the crazy, amazing Leia Force moment going right into the Chewbacca eating a fried porg scene with other porgs going blah, 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 and all sad-faced and whatnot, and it's just like, I don't care about the porgs. Nope. I just nope the porgs. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. As always, I've been your host, Trevor Starkey from TrevorTrove.com. You can follow me at SnarkyStarkey on Twitter. And until next time, from here at the Trove, treasure your friends.